a child, culture meant one thing to me: the traditions, customs, and values of a place and of its people. To me, culture was, alongside with geographical differences, the only differentiating factor between two places. Culture was the religion, the language, the cuisine, the movies, songs, the life and soul of a place and of its people. And it still is, but I don't think it's the only definition anymore. As I grew up and had the opportunities to travel and discover new places, my understanding of the world started to broaden and deepen. I associated the history I had learned, the sights I saw, the people I'd met, with my own memories of each place. I saw the world through my own lens, as everyone does. My name is Alice Torres, and as you may have gathered, today I am here to talk to you about culture. But first, I'd like to bring to light this question. My mother was born and raised in France. My father was born in Honduras, raised between its capital Tegucigalpa and here in Geneva, Switzerland. I was born in France, raised in 7 different countries on 4 different continents. Now, with that information, what do you think my culture is? Do I adhere to a French culture because that's where I go on every holiday? Am I only Latina because some Europeans think I'm just tan all year round? Am I part Korean because even though I've never been there, for 3 years one of my closest friends was South Korean and we shared lunches every day? Or am I Swiss because I've spent the last 4 years here and I feel somewhat at home, which I'll come back to in a moment. We receive by birth one or several nationalities, but our culture is not necessarily summed up just by our nationality. In fact, as a Franco-Honduran, I do not particularly identify with most people of either of those 2 countries. But if I were to ask someone what their culture is, there's a good chance they'd give an answer starting with something like, well, I was born in this place, grew up with these people, etc., etc. It's not uncommon to get a short summary of someone's ancestry when asking an acquaintance more about themselves. Oh, excuse the slides, I'm trying to get into art school. In short, they'd state their origins, which is only the cultures that they inherited. What if there was more to it than that? Doesn't it all seem a bit contradictory to recognize that the general meaning of culture is so vast and rich, yet lose much of that when speaking of ourselves? I believe that we're all worth being spoken about with as much admiration and fascination as when speaking of a place that we hold with respect. Culture is not tied down to one place. 2 people who grew up in the same country, city, school, speaking the same language will never have exactly the same culture. Because to me, culture occurs in 2 ways. There is the personal culture and that of community. So culture is defined by many as a feeling of belonging due to shared ideas, thought processes, and values. It's the shared rituals, such as having a 2-hour lunch break in France or eating corn tortillas with red beans in Honduras. But if defined in this way, cultures seem entirely distinct, with no space for overlapping or sharing of ideas. Cultures are not so impermeable. They can grow together, apart, or within each other. Cultures from one area can spread to another to enrich it, just as it can gain from that other area. In fact, cultures are like the people that they occur in. They interact. On top of all this, being from a country does not imply that you have to feel a strong link to it. Although I am from Honduras, my visits to my home country are few and far between. My Spanish is quite imperfect, and I live a completely different life to most people in Honduras. However, I still love this country that I know less well, and it will always be a part of my culture. Now, from this idea of belonging, I'd now like to talk to you about the concept of home. Please, take a moment and think about what home means to you. Is it the house that you grew up in? Is it where you keep your pajamas, as I thought for so many years? Or is it where your mother is, as was suggested by a tattoo on an old teacher of mine? True story. A few months ago, my brother, who studies journalism, had a friend send out questionnaires to third culture kids, meaning people with parents of two different countries living in a third country as expatriates. My brother and I are both third culture kids, and coincidentally, I think a few of you here today might be third culture kids or adults. So anyway, this friend of my brother, who also studied journalism, sent out questionnaires, and the part that stuck out most to me was the one about home. This was my answer. For many years, home to me was where my pajamas were kept, where I would be sleeping that night, whether that be a hotel's room, a relative's house, a secondary residence, or the house that I'd lived in for years at a time. Although this is still a very strong feeling within me, in recent times I started adopting the idea that home can also be a person or a group of people. Sometimes I could be hanging out at a friend's house and feel more at home than the home I'll return to that evening. Or I could be riding the bus, listening to a favorite song, and get a very homely feeling. Home is a complex word to me, and I hope to get to a point of personal growth where I can say that home is very much within myself. I think home to me is more of a feeling than a location. So home is not summed up by just where your parents are from or where you live. To me, it's where you feel at ease, truly. And this would all be fine and dandy, but as it turns out, your personal culture has a huge impact on where you consider your home or homes to be. A few weeks ago, I was talking with a friend about family and holidays. He said all of his family was from the US, that both his parents were from there, but that he didn't consider it to be his home because he never lived or had a house there. I found that quite understandable. But what surprised me the most is that he said his home was Geneva, I guess. He was born and raised in Geneva, but he feels he does not assimilate entirely with the locals. Perhaps this is due to his slightly hesitant French, or the fact that he attends an international school in English with mostly other expatriates. He is a foreigner of sorts in America, and a foreigner of sorts here. Perhaps some people, like this friend, are the perfect proof that culture is not tied down to where your family comes from, or where you live, or any place at all, but the different elements of people and places that you keep within yourself. So the culture of community is taken into the personal culture. In fact, the personal culture is a sort of collage of different community cultures. It's your favorite song, dish, place, book, phrase, and outfit, which is why it's perfectly unique. Different elements are of different importances and origins depending on the person. And your home, or homes, are a part of that. All of these different cultural elements are what weave together the fabric of you. The personal culture is also made up of an array of components, whether they be external, such as the influence from your family, your religion, your school, or work, or whether they are internal, such as your personality, the way you respond emotionally to things, or your personal experiences in history. Your culture is also made up of your repeated actions and ceremonials, whether they are as lighthearted as family inside jokes, or as significant and profound as praying. My daily cups of tea every morning and every afternoon are part of my rituals, just as yours may be a call to your mother, a playlist on your daily commute, or a yearly trip to the sea or the mountains. So, to resume, we do not belong to just one culture. And our culture is not summed up by our nationality. Even if you think you do have one culture, it's very much multifaceted. The different elements, like the influences from your family, your school, your favorite song or piece of literature, all of these elements are what come together to form you and your culture. Now you have some pieces there already, but you can also actively decide to include others by discovering new people, places, and ways of thinking. So, I invite each and every one of you to ask yourselves and each other these questions. What is home to me? And just as equally, what builds up my culture? Thank you.